Hello students, Assalamu alaikum. Hope all of you doing well. In labor economics today we are going to explore the labor supply. Learning outcomes. After watching this video, you will be able to understand market, labor force, wage, labor supply curve and its different types. Market. First of all, we define the market. What is market? Very simple way. A market is any place where sellers of a particular good or services can meet with the buyers of these goods and services. It creates the potential for a transaction to take place. The buyer must have something they can offer in exchange for the product to create the successful transaction. Labor market. What is the labor market? What is meant by the labor market? Definition. A labor market is a place where workers and employees interact with each other. In the labor market, employers compete to hire the best and workers compete for the best satisfying job. In this market, labor demand is a firm's demand for labor and labor supply is the worker supply of labor. Labor force. The definition of the labor force was previously defined. Again, I refresh this definition. The labor force is the sum of employed plus unemployed in the economy. The number of employed plus unemployed people in the economy is called the labor force. Here the labor force is the number of people who are employed plus unemployed, who are looking for work to be considered part of the labor force. You must be available, willing to work and have looked for a job recently. The official unemployment rate measures the jobless who are still in the labor force. Wage. This is another very important concept of the labor market to define the labor supply and labor demand. So what is the wage and wage rate? A wage is a monetary compensation paid by the employer to an employee in exchange for work done. Wages are a part of the expenses that are involved in running business. Labor supply. Now come to the labor supply in mainstream economic theories. The supply of labor is the total hours that workers wish to work at a given real wage rate. The labor supply is the total hour that workers or employees are willing to work at a given wage rate. Changes in income, population, work layer preferences, price of related goods, and the services and expectations about the future can also cause the labor supply to shift to the right or left. That means the labor rate or wages is the only factor that cause movement along the curve. These are the other factors that are cause the shift the labor force to the left or right other than non-wage factors. Labor supply curve. Now we learn what is the labor supply curve. A labor supply curve shows the number of workers who are willing and able to work in the occupation at the different wages. Draw a curve through the points to show the labor supply curve. The simple labor supply curve in the labor market. On the x-axis we take the quantity of labor and vertical axis we take the wages, and there is a positive relationship between the S curve is the labor supply curve, which is positively sloped due to the because labor are willing to more work on the higher wages. The wage rate. The higher the wage rate, the more labor is supplied. which means the supply curve of the labor will slope upward, as I already told you. The worker wage, along with any bonus, provides the main precautionary benefit from working. Labor supply for the whole market is assumed to be positively related to the wage rate, and market supply curve slopes upward. Here is the individual supply curve. In previous slides, I discussed the market labor supply curve. Here's the individual labor supply curve. On x-axis, we take the labor supply, and vertical axis in the wage rate. Look at it is positively sloped, but curve to right at wage 1. The reason, the supply curve for the individual cannot continue to slope upwards indefinitely. Labor market theory suggests it will initially slope upwards and then bend backwards up to the wage rate of W1. The relative price of the leisure increase and workers will look to switch from leisure to work. In other words, there is a strong substitution effect as wages start to rise. Hence, the supply curve slopes upward to point L. However, beyond W1, the income effect begins to dominate the further rise in the money wages, which increase the real income, mean that less work is required to achieve the same level of the real income. Now we explain the different determinants of the labor supply. Labor supply can change under the number of circumstances, including the change in the length of the working week, participation rates, demographic factors such as migration, and changes in the age structure of the population. Qualification and skills also very important. The length of training, shifts in the labor supply curve. I have already explained you about the movement along the curve due to the wage factor, and the other factors shift the labor supply curve to the left or right. The labor supply curve will shift its position following a change in the non-wage determinant of supply as listed above. Increase in the expected future real wage. Increase in the expected future real wage, the labor supply curve move from N naught to N1 to the left. An increase in the expected future real wage, an increase in the expected future real wage, holding everything else fixed or constant. Decrease labor supply, which is presented as the leftward shift of the NS curve from 0 to 1. Increase in the wealth, an increase in the wealth holding everything else fixed. Decreases labor supply, which is represented as leftward shift of the NS curve. Increase in the current real wage. Here is the movement along the curve. This is due to the change in the real wage from N0 to N. An increase in the current real wage holding everything else fixed or constant increases the labor supply NS, and this is represented a movement along the curve. Very important. Thank you very much for your consideration.